Stop seeking, start being. Spirituality without illusions is not a guide to enlightenment. It is not a system. It is not a method. And it is not another attempt to dress life up in spiritual language meant to make difficult things stop hurting. It is a book about dismantling, about stripping away layers, about stopping in the places we usually avoid because they are too ordinary, too uncomfortable, or not spiritual enough. It usually starts innocently, with a sense that something is missing, that the life you're living is fine on the surface, but underneath there's a quiet dissatisfaction, an unspoken, "this isn't it yet." And so you begin. You search for books, teachers, practices, for words that promise that somewhere further, deeper, higher, there is something that will finally complete you. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's deeply human. Almost everyone who has ever stopped for a moment and truly felt their own life knows this impulse. The problem begins when seeking turns into a way of being, when it's no longer a question, but a habit, when instead of leading you toward yourself, it endlessly postpones that meeting. Seeking feeds on the promise of the future, always not yet. One more book, one more retreat, one more method, a bit more work on yourself, one more breakthrough, and life passes by while you're still on the path, except you're no longer sure where that path is supposed to lead. Look at this in yourself. How many times have you thought that if only you were calmer, more aware, less reactive, then you could finally live fully? How often has spirituality become a repair project, a subtle rejection of who you are right now? Seeking never ends because it's driven by lack. And lack, if it's not seen clearly, will always find a new object, even spirituality. Maybe especially spirituality, because it can pretend it's not an escape, but growth. Our Zen master once said something very simple. If you seek the truth, you move away from it by exactly the distance of your seeking. That sentence can irritate. It can sound arrogant or empty. But stay with it for a moment. Don't analyze it. Notice what it stirs in you. Because maybe truth isn't something you find. Maybe it's what remains when you stop running. Seeking assumes distance, you and here, truth and there, awakening and sometime in the future, peace and on the other side of effort. And this assumption is the foundation of spiritual restlessness. As long as you believe it, you can't truly rest, not even in meditation, not even in silence, not even in moments that could otherwise be enough. Ask yourself honestly, have you ever truly not been seeking, even for a minute, without a plan for improvement, without interpreting, without checking whether this is it? If so, you might remember something very ordinary, maybe even disappointing. Nothing spectacular, no visions, no answers. And yet something was different, lighter, more real. Seeking is loud, being is quiet. But the quiet of being isn't romantic. It doesn't stroke the ego. It doesn't give you a story to tell. It doesn't make you someone who knows. And that's why it's so rarely chosen. It's easier to be a seeker than to be nobody special, sitting inside your life exactly as it is. Pause for a moment, not to achieve anything, just check. Right now, in this moment, is something actually missing? Or is it just a thought saying that something is missing? Don't answer too quickly. Stay with the question. Maybe the greatest spiritual illusion isn't that truth is somewhere else. Maybe the greatest illusion is the belief that without seeking, life has no meaning. What if meaning doesn't appear at the end of the road, but reveals itself when you stop walking? As long as you are seeking, you are postponing the meeting with what is already here. It rarely begins as an escape. More often it begins as exhaustion, as pain you can't quite name, as a life that somehow doesn't work, even though objectively everything should be fine. Spirituality then appears as a promise of relief, a soft place where you won't have to feel what's uncomfortable anymore. And again, this is deeply human. There's no guilt or shame in wanting relief. The problem isn't that you seek comfort. The problem begins when spirituality becomes a clever way of not truly meeting yourself. Spiritual bypassing is subtle, much subtler than alcohol, work, or distraction, because it looks good. It has noble intentions. It's wrapped in words like awareness, acceptance, transcendence. And yet the mechanism is often the same. I don't want to feel what's here. I want to be somewhere else. Look at this in yourself gently. Do you meditate to avoid feeling sadness? Do you use observing emotions to distance yourself from them? Do you tell yourself this is just ego when something hurts, instead of letting that pain be felt? A Christian contemplative once wrote, "You cannot meet God by bypassing your humanity. You can replace the word God with truth, life, or presence. The meaning stays the same. What you try to escape is precisely the doorway you need to walk through." Spirituality as escape often shows up as being above humanity. The belief that emotions are obstacles, that relationships are distractions, that the body is something to transcend, that suffering exists only because of ignorance. It sounds clean, elevated, but in practice it often becomes cold and disconnected. True presence doesn't separate you from life. It drops you right into it, into the mess, into contradiction, into uncertainty. If your spirituality makes you emotionally unavailable, less capable of intimacy, more indifferent to pain, it's worth stopping and asking, what am I running from? A moment of silence now. No technique, no work. Just notice, what is it in yourself that you least want to feel? Don't correct the answer. Don't turn it into a problem. In Sufi tradition, there's a sentence that borders on brutality. The path runs straight through what you avoid, not through visions, not through states, through what is tight, embarrassing, unresolved, through the ordinary human experience of being someone who doesn't always know, doesn't always manage, and isn't always calm. Spiritual escape often feeds on the idea that one day you'll be ready to live, when you're healed, when you've transcended ego, when you understand. But life doesn't wait. It happens now, also in chaos, also in pain, also in your imperfection. Try a very simple practice, almost unimpressive. The next time a difficult emotion appears, don't name it. Don't observe it from a distance. Notice where it lives in the body, and let it stay there, without a goal, without a story, for a few breaths. That's all. You might discover something uncomfortable, that what you called spirituality was a shield, or something liberating, that you don't have to run anywhere to be in truth. Spirituality is not about leaving yourself behind. It's about staying, even when you want to disappear. If your spirituality separates you from life, it's not awakening. It's a refined form of escape. There is a very old impulse inside you, quiet but persistent. It says, "Who you are right now is not enough." That voice isn't always hostile. Sometimes it sounds like ambition, sometimes like spiritual longing, and sometimes like a promise. Just a bit more work on yourself, and then you'll finally be okay. The myth of enlightenment gets along with this voice perfectly. In its popular version, enlightenment is a destination, a final point, a moment after which everything falls into place. Suffering disappears, or at least stops mattering. Reactions end. Life becomes light, clear, spacious. You become someone else, better, higher, beyond. But this is not a description of reality. It's ego's fantasy of a spiritual career. Look closely at how cleverly this works. The ego you usually criticize and try to transcend finds a new role, a candidate for enlightenment. It's no longer about success, money, or recognition. Now it's about awareness levels, who is awake and who is still asleep. And look at this honestly in yourself. Do you compare yourself spiritually to others? Do you sometimes feel more conscious because you meditate, read the right books, tell others it's just ego? Or maybe the opposite. You feel inferior because others seem calmer, more present, more there. Both sides are the same movement, the need to be more than you are. In one Advaita text, there's a sentence many people skip because it's uncomfortable. Enlightenment fulfills no personal expectations, none, not the noble ones, not the subtle ones. Because enlightenment, if the word is even useful, has nothing to do with improving the person. It has to do with seeing that the person was never what you thought it was. And this is not a romantic realization. It can be disappointing, sometimes even painful. Because if you don't become more, then what are you left with? You're left with who you are, without footnotes, without spiritual certificates, without a future version of yourself that finally has everything figured out. And this is precisely what many people cannot accept, because it means the end of escape into a better later. The myth of enlightenment promises uniqueness. Truth is ordinary, quiet, unremarkable. It gives you no story to tell the world or yourself. It doesn't make you an authority. It takes the ground out from under all your spiritual images. In mystical traditions, enlightenment is rarely described the way modern spirituality does. More often, the language is about dying, loss, the collapse of false reference points. And it's not about dramatic gestures. It's a quiet process. You lose interest in being someone special. And then something paradoxical happens. When you stop trying to be above, you start being here, in relationships, in the body, in emotions, in a life that isn't always coherent or comfortable. The next time the thought appears, I should already be further, pause. See it like any other background noise. Don't argue with it. Don't fix it. Notice what remains when you don't feed it. You may discover that what really hurts isn't the lack of enlightenment, but the lack of permission to be an ordinary human being, with limitations, with reactions, with moments of confusion. And maybe that's where honest spirituality begins. Not in becoming someone else, but in stopping that attempt. As long as you want to be more, you're avoiding the only place where anything real exists, who you are right now. The ego has an extraordinary talent for survival. Just when you think you've seen through it, it changes costumes. It drops old ambitions, old strategies, old roles, and puts on a new one, a spiritual costume. Suddenly it no longer wants to be better than others in obvious ways. Now it wants to be more aware, more present, less egoic. And this is where things get truly slippery. Because who exactly wants to get rid of the ego? Ask that question slowly, without cleverness, without the automatic answer, because that's what you're supposed to do. If you look carefully, you'll see that it's the ego trying to get rid of itself, which is logically impossible, but psychologically very common. Ego fights ego, judges ego, criticizes its own reactions as not conscious enough, and in doing so, it strengthens precisely what it claims to want to dissolve. See this in yourself in small, ordinary moments. You notice jealousy and immediately think, that's just ego. You react with anger and then scold yourself for lacking awareness. You feel the urge to defend yourself and a moment later feel ashamed for still being there. All of this is ego, just in a more sophisticated version. In many spiritual traditions, people talk about dissolving the ego. The problem is that this phrase is deeply misunderstood. The ego is not an enemy to be destroyed. It's not something you can put aside after enough meditation. The ego is simply a functional structure, the way personal experience is organized. Trying to annihilate it usually ends in spiritual violence against yourself. Our Zen teacher once said very soberly, when you try to kill the ego, you only create a stronger version of it. And you can see this clearly in many awakened narratives: subtle superiority, distance, coldness, a lack of real softness. The ego loves projects, and getting rid of the ego is one of the most ambitious projects it can invent. It has a goal, criteria, comparisons, and always a future in which things will finally be better. Meanwhile, the present moment becomes perpetually insufficient. This doesn't mean there's no change. Change happens, but not the way the ego wants it to. Not through improvement, not through fighting. More often through something that initially feels like failure. You run out of energy to fix yourself. You lose interest in spiritual strategies, and you're left with what is bare, without instructions. This is the moment the ego hates most, because there is no success in it. And yet this is often where something truly loosens. The next time you notice a reaction you don't like, don't do anything with it. Don't name it. Don't analyze it. Don't transcend it. See it exactly as it is, and notice that you are here too, not as a controller, as presence. You may discover that the ego doesn't disappear, but it loses its central position. It stops being a problem to solve. It becomes one movement among many in your experience, and then you don't have to love it or fight it. You just stop believing it completely. Spirituality is not about being without ego. It's about the ego no longer being your only point of reference. That's a huge difference, even if it looks unspectacular. As long as you're trying to get rid of the ego, it's still running the entire conversation. Everyone says silence is good, that it heals, that it calms, that truth lives there, and all of that can be true. But there's something else that's talked about far less often. Silence can be terrifying, not because it's empty, but because it's too full. Silence can't be talked over. It doesn't respond to your explanations. It doesn't shrug when you escape into another thought. Silence doesn't distract. It concentrates attention. And that's exactly why we do so much to avoid it. Look at how this shows up in practice. You sit down to meditate. For a moment there's calm. And then movement starts. Thoughts, images, plans, memories, sometimes a flood. And almost automatically, the reaction appears. I'm doing it wrong. I need to focus. I should calm down. But this isn't a mistake, it's a defense mechanism. Silence removes your armor, and under the armor there isn't always light. Often there's tension, sadness, anxiety with no clear reason, a sense of emptiness that refuses to be filled. And then the impulse appears. Run. Go back to thinking, interpreting, spiritual concepts, anything that gives a sense of control. Look at this gently in yourself. Is silence a place of rest for you, or something that needs to be used properly? Can you sit without a goal, without a practice, without improving the experience? Many people confuse silence with relaxation. They're not the same. Relaxation soothes the nervous system. Silence exposes it. It shows how much tension you've been carrying without noticing because you were always occupied. And that tension is often what makes silence feel uncomfortable. A teacher once said, "You're not afraid of silence, you're afraid of what you'll hear in it." And this isn't about voices or visions. It's about very simple experiences: loneliness, helplessness, the lack of a story about yourself. It's about meeting what hasn't been processed. Silence is not something you achieve. It's the background. It was always there. Noise, inner and outer, and is the active movement. When you stop sustaining it, silence doesn't appear. It reveals itself, and along with it, everything that has been frozen inside you. That's why silence can be confronting. Not because something is wrong with you, but because there hasn't been space to see these things before. Spirituality that promises only bliss and calm often skips this stage, and then wonders why nothing really changes. Instead of looking for silence in special conditions, notice it in ordinary moments. In line at the store, on the bus, before sleep. See what happens when, for 1 minute, you don't reach for your phone or your thoughts. Don't interpret what appears. Don't turn it into a story about yourself. Silence doesn't need commentary, it needs permission. You may discover that what you were afraid of wasn't silence, but the absence of escape. And when there's nowhere to run, something very ordinary remains, being here, with what is, without decoration. Silence doesn't make you a better person. It doesn't give answers. It doesn't solve problems. But it has one quality nothing else can replace. It doesn't allow you to lie to yourself. Silence is not a place of peace. It's a place of truth, and truth rarely feels peaceful at first. There is a subtle misunderstanding that can keep someone stuck for years. It sounds innocent. I want to experience awareness. Or, I had an experience of pure presence. Or, in meditation, I entered a state of awareness. These phrases circulate in books, retreats, and conversations as if they were obvious. And yet they hide a trap that works remarkably well. Because awareness is not an experience. Experiences appear in awareness. This is not wordplay, it's a difference that, once seen, turns most spiritual effort upside down. An experience always has a beginning and an end. It's intense or subtle, pleasant or difficult. It comes and goes. You can remember it, compare it, want it back. Awareness has none of these qualities. It doesn't arrive, it doesn't leave, it has no flavor. It can't be stored or accurately described. And yet the mind keeps trying to turn it into an object. Look closely at your own experience. Have you ever had a moment that felt open, quiet, spacious, and then found yourself longing for it, thinking, "That's how it should be. I want to get back there"? In that moment, the experience became a benchmark. Everything else became failure. This is where spiritual frustration is born. Meditation stops working. Silence doesn't come. Presence doesn't feel the same. And the mind starts strategizing. More practice, more effort, a better technique. But the problem isn't the absence of an experience. The problem is trying to capture something that was never an object to begin with. An Advaita teacher once said very plainly, "Awareness is not something you can see. It is that by which everything is seen." If this is understood only intellectually, little changes. But if it's noticed directly, a certain kind of seeking ends. Try something very simple right now. Don't close your eyes. Look at any object in front of you. Notice the thought that describes it. Now ask quietly, what is aware of all this? Don't look for an answer. Notice that every word, every image, every sensation is already being noticed. And this noticing has no shape or boundary. At this point, the mind often rebels because there's nothing to grab. No it, no state to claim, and that's exactly the point. If awareness were an experience, it would just be another product in the spiritual marketplace. Many people unconsciously turn spirituality into collecting states, calm ones, open ones, thoughtless ones, and there's nothing wrong with such states appearing. The problem starts when they become the goal, when you begin judging yourself and your life by whether you're in awareness or have fallen out of it. You cannot fall out of awareness. You can fall out of an idea about it. Notice this. Even confusion is noticed, even chaos, even the thought, "I don't understand any of this." If something is experienced, awareness is already present, not as a state, as a fact. Instead of trying to enter awareness, check whether you have ever been outside of it. Not logically, experientially. In an ordinary moment, in irritation, in fatigue, in conversation. You may discover something that doesn't sound spiritual, but is deeply freeing. Nothing needs to be maintained. Awareness doesn't depend on your focus or your practice. It precedes every effort. And when this is seen, spirituality loses much of its drama. Not because life becomes easy, but because you stop chasing something that was never separate. Awareness is not what you experience. It is what everything happens within, including your search. Meditation has good marketing these days. It looks calm, aesthetic, easy to sell. In the pictures, people sit upright, slightly smiling, bathed in golden sunset light. Everything looks clean and harmonious, as if practice were a natural extension of pleasure, as if all you had to do was sit down, close your eyes, and be. Reality is often different. Meditation, when it stops being decoration, quickly stops being comfortable. Not because it's technically difficult, but because it takes away your distractions. It takes away the story you keep telling about yourself. And then you're left with what you usually drown out. The romance of meditation is the belief that it should lead to a specific state: calm, clarity, lightness. But the most honest form of meditation leads you into contact with what is actually present. And that can be disappointing, boring, chaotic, sometimes even irritating. Look at this in yourself. You sit down to meditate, and after 5 minutes you think nothing is happening. Or worse, that things are worse than before. More thoughts, more tension, more restlessness. And the question appears, am I doing this wrong? Maybe for the first time you're doing it right. Meditation is not a tool for improving your mood. It may improve it, but that's a side effect, not the point. Its core movement is simple and ruthless. You stop running. You stop manipulating experience. You stop choosing what is spiritual and what isn't. A Zen teacher once said, "Meditation is meeting who you are when you stop fixing yourself." And this sentence exposes the whole issue, because most of us sit down to meditate precisely to fix something, to calm down, to become a better version of ourselves, to not feel what feels uncomfortable. Meditation does not cooperate with that plan. Notice how quickly subtle violence toward yourself appears. Focus. Come back to the breath. Don't think. These instructions sound harmless, but they often come from resistance to what's happening now, and resistance increases tension instead of dissolving it. Meditation without romance can feel dry, ordinary, sometimes even empty. And that's precisely why it's honest. It doesn't feed expectations. It doesn't promise rewards. It doesn't turn you into a practitioner who's one step ahead of the rest of the world. Notice something else. The less romance, the more life. Meditation stops being a separate activity. It stops being spiritual time. It begins to show up in ordinary situations, conversations, conflicts, exhaustion. Not as a state, but as a willingness to be with what is. The next time something triggers you, don't meditate on it. Don't breathe in a special way. Just notice the reaction in the body and see if you can avoid fixing it for a few seconds. That's enough. Romance promises that practice will make you peaceful. Honest meditation shows you how unpeaceful you actually are and doesn't make a problem out of it. Maybe you'll discover that meditation wasn't meant to change you. Maybe it was only meant to stop lying to yourself. Meditation isn't there to make you feel better. It's there to stop you from pretending. At some point, almost everyone wants someone who knows, someone who has walked the path, someone who can name what feels chaotic inside you and say, "This is normal," or better yet, "This will pass." That desire is understandable. When the ground under your feet starts to crumble, it's natural to look for someone who seems to stand more firmly. The problem begins when someone else's certainty replaces your own honesty. Spiritual authority is seductive because it promises a shortcut. You don't have to wander anymore. You don't have to doubt. You just need to trust. Accept the interpretation. Follow the instructions and ideally, hand over the right to define your experience. Again, this isn't black and white. Teachers matter. Encounters with other people can be deeply moving. Words spoken at the right moment can open something that's been locked for years. The problem isn't relationship, it's dependency. Look at this without judgment. Do you ever invalidate your own experience because the teacher said something else? Do you doubt what you feel if it doesn't fit the teaching you've adopted as true? Do you look outward for confirmation instead of checking what's actually happening in you? The trap of authority lies in how easily clarity gets confused with infallibility, and how easily charisma gets mistaken for truth. Someone speaks calmly, logically, with confidence, so you assume they see more. But whatever they see is still filtered through their history, their body, their limitations, just like yours. In the most honest spiritual traditions, teachers warned people against themselves. They said, "Don't believe me. Check for yourself. If my words don't make sense in your experience, discard them." This wasn't false humility. It was an understanding of how easily power sneaks into even the subtlest relationships. Authority feeds ego on both sides. For the student, it offers the feeling of being chosen, close to the source. For the teacher, it offers a sense of importance. Even with clean intentions, the mechanism operates, always. A mature relationship with a teacher doesn't mean giving yourself away. It means their words bring you back to your own experience, not away from it. If you feel smaller, more dependent, less trusting of yourself, that's not guidance, that's appropriation, even if it's wrapped in spiritual language. When you hear a teaching, don't ask, "Is this true?" Ask, "Does this open me or does it close me? Do you feel more space or more pressure, obligation, and fear of getting it wrong?" A real teacher doesn't want your loyalty. They want you to stop needing them. And that's rare because it requires consent to one's own irrelevance. There may come a moment when you realize you no longer need anyone to tell you how things are. Not because you know, but because you've stopped running from not knowing. And lived honestly, not knowing is far more alive than any doctrine. If someone becomes more important than your own experience, they are not a guide. They are a new form of being lost. Pain has a bad reputation. It's associated with something that needs to be removed as quickly as possible, fixed, worked through, transcended. In spirituality, it's often treated as a sign of failure, proof that you're doing something wrong, that you're not conscious enough, that you're stuck. And yet pain is one of the most honest experiences a human being can have. It doesn't pretend. It doesn't speak in half-truths. It doesn't soften the message. The problem is not pain itself. The problem is the relationship you have with it. Notice how quickly the fixing impulse appears. Sadness arises, and immediately you want to know why. Fear shows up, and you start looking for a technique to calm it down. Grief appears, and you begin working on acceptance. It all sounds mature, responsible, but very often it's resistance in disguise. Not resistance to pain itself, but resistance to being with it. Pain in its essence does not demand a solution. It demands presence. In one mystical tradition, there's a sentence that sounds almost brutal. What hurts most is the doorway. Not because pain is sacred or should be glorified, but because that's exactly where your strategies end, where you can no longer pretend, where positive thinking and spiritual explanations stop working. Look at this honestly in yourself. When pain appears, is your first response curiosity or escape? Can you stay with an unpleasant experience without turning it into a story, without making it a problem to solve? Pain becomes a problem only when you try not to feel it, when you tell yourself it shouldn't be there, that it's not spiritual, that others have it worse. Then tension doubles. There's pain plus resistance, and that resistance is what exhausts you. This doesn't mean you should sink into pain or romanticize it. It means you stop pushing it away. You allow it to be what it is, a signal, a movement, energy in the body, an experience that wants to be seen, not interpreted. Pain teaches things the mind dislikes. It teaches that you're not in full control, that not everything can be managed, that sometimes the only thing you can do is be present and breathe, without a plan, without a guarantee that it will pass quickly. When pain appears, don't ask, how do I fix this? Ask, can I stay with this for one more breath without running, just one, then see. You may discover that pain isn't trying to destroy you. Often it's trying to reconnect you with yourself, because pain tends to arise exactly where you stopped listening long ago. A spirituality that makes no room for pain becomes sterile, disembodied, inhuman. The truth is that pain is often what brings us back into the body, back into the present moment, back into honesty. There's nothing elevated about this. It's ordinary, soft, sometimes helpless. And if you can stay there, without heroics, without drama, something quiet but real happens. Pain stops being an enemy. It becomes information, a movement of life asking for attention. Pain is not an obstacle on the path. Very often it is the path, just not the one you wanted. In spirituality, the language of healing emotions appears very quickly. It sounds gentle, safe, reassuring, as if emotions were something that breaks, and with the right practice, returns to a proper state, like a fractured bone or an infection. But emotions are not an illness, and the sooner you see this, the less violence you'll do to yourself. Emotions are movement. They are the body's response to what's happening. They don't arise to be fixed when they arise to be lived. And lived doesn't mean analyzed, dissected, or endlessly interpreted. It means allowing them to do what they came to do, move through. Look at how this plays out in everyday life. Anger appears, and immediately the thought, this isn't good, I should be more conscious, this is an old wound. Sadness appears, and right away there's a plan, inner child work, a session, a technique, anything as long as it doesn't last too long. The emotion barely shows up before it's already being corrected. That's not healing, that's control. Many people confuse emotional regulation with emotional suppression in a more refined form. Instead of alcohol, meditation. Instead of shouting, affirmation. Instead of distraction through activity, escape into the observer. Same mechanism, different costume. Look at this honestly, without shame. Do you really allow yourself to feel emotions? Or do you mostly talk about them? Do they have space in your body? Or do they stop at the level of explanation? An emotion that is fully lived leaves no residue. An emotion that is interrupted does. Those unfinished movements are what you carry for years, later calling them blocks, trauma, or something to heal. Sometimes all that was missing was permission to let them finish their work. This isn't easy, because feeling emotions isn't aesthetic. It can be chaotic, embarrassing, completely incompatible with the image of a spiritually mature person. But life has no obligation to fit your self-image. An emotion you don't resist often changes on its own, not because you did something to it, but because it was allowed to be felt. In Sufi tradition, there's a saying, "Don't silence the guest, invite them, and they will leave on their own." Emotions are like that. They arrive with information. If you lock the door, they start pounding. If you open it, they often don't stay long. The next time a strong emotion appears, don't ask, "How do I heal this?" Ask, "Can I feel this without a story about myself for 20 seconds? Just that, nothing more." You may discover something that doesn't sound spiritual but is deeply freeing. You are not broken. Your emotions are not proof of a lack of development. They are signs of life, reacting, moving, responding. A spirituality that leaves no room for emotions becomes dry and disconnected. A spirituality that lets them exist becomes human. And humanity is not an obstacle on the path. It is the path. Emotions don't need healing. They need you to stop running from them. A brief pause before we continue. If you're enjoying this audiobook and would like to hear more content exploring spirituality, self-awareness, and conscious living, please subscribe and enable notifications. Your support helps this channel continue creating thoughtful, high-quality audiobooks like this one. Now let's continue. Spiritual solitude can be very convenient. You have silence, space, control. No one provokes you. No one presses on your tender spots. You can be calm, attentive, even loving, as long as no one wants anything from you. And it's very easy to mistake this state for maturity. Relationships verify these illusions quickly, because spirituality isn't tested in a cave or on a meditation cushion. It's tested in the kitchen, at work, in bed, in a conversation that went wrong. It's tested when someone doesn't understand you, when someone crosses your boundaries, when someone says something that hits exactly where it still hurts. Look, honestly, how aware are you when someone criticizes you? How present are you when you feel dismissed? How quickly do you close, explain, withdraw, or attack? Relationships don't ask about your practices, they show what is. Many people use spirituality to distance themselves from relationships. That's just projection. That's their ego. I'm above this. These sentences sound wise, but very often they're armor. They protect you from intimacy, and intimacy always carries risk. The risk of being hurt. The risk of being seen without filters. Spirituality in isolation can be peaceful. Spirituality in relationship is alive and often uncomfortable. Notice how quickly things appear in relationships that seemed resolved in silence. Jealousy, the need for recognition, fear of rejection, control, helplessness. This doesn't mean you failed. It means you're a human being in contact with another human being. Relationship is not an obstacle on the spiritual path. It's a mirror. Pause for a moment and think of the person who has triggered you most recently. Not the easy one, the difficult one. Notice what exactly moves in you. Don't analyze who's right. Notice the reaction, the tension, the story that immediately forms about you or about them. And now something important. Don't try to be better. Don't try to be more aware. See what's there without fixing it. That is the practice, not silence, not technique. In relationships, it's not about never reacting. It's about seeing the reaction instead of becoming it. A huge difference. Reaction happens automatically. Seeing it doesn't. It requires courage and permission to not look good. In one mystical tradition, there's a sentence, "You will not know yourself without the other." Not because the other completes you, but because the other brings out what you wouldn't see alone. Without relationships, it's very easy to live inside an idea of yourself. The next time you feel the impulse to withdraw or shut down, pause for 1 second. Notice what you're trying to protect. Don't judge it, just see it. A spirituality that avoids relationships becomes sterile, safe, and lifeless. A spirituality that enters relationships without armor is risky, but real, because life doesn't happen under ideal conditions. It happens between people, with their imperfections, collisions, misunderstandings. You don't have to be ready for relationships. No one is. It's enough to be present as much as you can, and honest about where you still run. If your spirituality doesn't work in relationships, it works only in imagination. In spirituality, the body is often treated as secondary, like a vehicle meant to carry you toward more important matters, like an obstacle that needs to be disciplined, calmed, or transcended. At best, a tool for practice, breath, posture, energy. And yet the body is the first and last place where life actually happens. You have no experience outside the body. Even the most subtle states pass through the nervous system, through muscle tension, through breath rhythm, through biology. When this is ignored, spirituality becomes abstract, detached, unembodied. Look at how easily this is missed. You speak about presence, but you don't feel your legs. You talk about acceptance, but your jaw is clenched. You speak of calm, while your belly is hard as stone. This isn't hypocrisy. It's lack of contact. The body doesn't lie. It doesn't know spiritual concepts. It doesn't care who you want to be. It responds to what is actually happening, and that's exactly why it can be uncomfortable, because it shows the truth faster than the mind can interpret it. For many people, this is surprisingly difficult. It's easier to think about awareness than to feel the weight of the body on a chair. Easier to talk about love than to feel tightness in the chest. But without this contact, everything stays in the head. A spirituality that bypasses the body often ends in dissociation. You float higher but lose ground. You become calm but absent, attentive but disconnected. From the outside, it may look like composure. Inside, it's often freeze. The body doesn't want to be transcended. It wants to be heard. In many contemplative traditions, the instruction is very simple. Go lower, not as degradation, but as grounding, into the belly, the pelvis, the feet, where pretending is impossible, where presence stops being an idea and becomes sensation. Look at this in yourself. When things become emotionally difficult, do you stay in the body stone or immediately escape into analysis? Can you remain with sensation before you name it as an emotion? Often, this moment determines whether the experience dissolves or freezes. Several times a day, pause for 10 seconds. Feel your feet. Feel the weight of your body. Don't add anything to it. This isn't a mindfulness technique. It's a reminder that you are here. Not in thoughts about yourself, not in a spiritual self-image, in a body that breathes, moves, and reacts. The body is where everything you've seen integrates. If something is only understood but not felt, it's not yours yet. It will return as tension, pain, fatigue, irritability. The body always demands attention. This isn't about loving the body or accepting it as an ideal. It's about stopping the neglect. That alone is enough to begin. You may discover something very ordinary. Presence isn't a mental state. It's a quality of being in the body. Calm doesn't come from thinking, but from grounding. Spirituality without the body is like a house without a foundation. Impressive maybe, but unable to withstand the first real shake. If you are not in your body, you are nowhere else either. If you ask people what awakening is, many will tell you a story. There's a climax, a flash, a breakthrough. Something opens, something ends, something never returns. Often there's light, ecstasy, a sense of unity, and it's not that such experiences don't happen. They do, but very rarely are they what people think they are. Because the real problem begins after the fireworks. Awakening in imagination is an event. Awakening in life is a process. Quiet, ungrateful, lacking drama. One that doesn't lend itself to storytelling because there's no clear line between before and after. It's more like a gradual loosening of the belief that life has to be different to be real. Look at this honestly. Are you waiting for a moment that will fix everything? For one experience after which you'll finally stop being afraid, reacting, doubting? That hope is understandable, but it's also part of the dream of escaping human life in one decisive leap. Awakening without fireworks is disappointing to the ego because it gives you no new identity. It doesn't make you special. It doesn't guarantee you're on the other side. Often it does the opposite. It exposes everything you didn't want to see: ordinariness, imperfection, repetition. And that's exactly its power. Many people mistake intensity for transformation, but intensity fades, always. What remains is very modest, a little more space between stimulus and reaction, a little less belief in every thought, a little more permission for life not to follow a plan. That's not something you can show off. Awakening without fireworks often shows up in very unremarkable ways. You argue less in your head. You need to be right less. You dramatize your inner states less. You notice more quickly when you're escaping. And sometimes, most difficult of all, you stop making such a big deal out of it. This doesn't mean life becomes easy. It means difficulty stops being a personal failure. In one tradition, there's a saying, "After awakening, chop wood and carry water." It's often romanticized, but its meaning is blunt. Life doesn't end. There's no new chapter called Now Only Light. There's ordinary life without the illusion that it should be something else. Instead of asking, "Am I awakened yet?" ask, "Am I a little less at war with what is today? If yes, that's enough." Awakening without fireworks doesn't give certainty. It gives honesty. It doesn't provide answers. It gives the capacity to stay with a question without panic. And that's a profound shift, even if it can't be measured or proven. Maybe the clearest sign of awakening isn't ecstasy, but the lack of need for it. The loss of hunger for experiences that would confirm your value or your level. The end of the rush to be somewhere else. If you're waiting for fireworks, you may miss that you woke up on an ordinary day. There's a moment people rarely talk about. The moment after everything, after the seeking, after the disappointments, after the experiences that were supposed to close something for good. The moment when it turns out that life goes on. And it's neither spectacularly better nor dramatically worse. It's just life. For many, this is the biggest surprise. Because somewhere in the background there was always hope that afterward something would finally change for good. That the weight would disappear. That relationships would become easy. That work, the body, money, everyday life would stop being an issue. And when that doesn't happen, a quiet disappointment appears. Sometimes even shame. Maybe this isn't it yet. Maybe I missed something. But life after so-called awakening is remarkably ordinary. You still wake up in the morning, you still get tired, you still react faster than you'd like sometimes. Things still hurt, physically or emotionally. The difference isn't in what happens, it's in how much you believe the stories about what's happening. Look, honestly, after important insights, did you expect bad days to disappear? That you'd never doubt again? That old patterns would be gone for good? If so, that wasn't a mistake. It was human hope. But life has no obligation to fulfill it. Life after awakening isn't about being present all the time. It's about noticing more quickly when you escape, and not turning that into a catastrophe. Before, escape meant failure. Now it's information. A movement you can see and let go of, sometimes immediately, sometimes later. This isn't a story about perfection. It's a story about less tension around imperfection. After awakening, if the word is useful at all, the project called Spiritual Me dissolves. There's no goal to reach, and for the ego, this can be the hardest part. Suddenly there's nothing to do, nothing to fix, nowhere to go. What's left is life as it is, and that requires consent, not effort. Many people at this point try to return to old structures, new teachings, new methods, new stages, because without them, emptiness appears. But this emptiness isn't lack. It's lack of narrative, and that's a crucial difference. Instead of asking, what else should I understand? Ask, can I just live right now without adding meaning? See what that question does in you. Life after awakening can be quiet, unphotogenic, sometimes even boring. And if you can stay there, you may discover something you couldn't see before. You don't need constant intensity to feel alive. An ordinary day without insights or breakthroughs is enough. This doesn't mean difficulties disappear. It means they're no longer treated as personal failure or spiritual problems. They're part of life, like joy, closeness, laughter, fatigue. Maybe that's the biggest shift. You stop treating your life as something that has to be different to be okay. After awakening, a new life doesn't begin. The same life continues, just without the illusion that it should be different. Ordinariness has a bad reputation. It's associated with mediocrity, lack of depth, giving up on dreams. In spirituality, it's often suspicious, as if it were proof that something went wrong, because it was supposed to be different, deeper, brighter, more. And yet, if you look honestly, you'll see that ordinariness is exactly what you've been running from all along. Ordinariness doesn't feed the ego. It gives no story. It doesn't distinguish you. It doesn't allow you to say, I'm someone who has seen more. It's quiet, neutral, without drama, and that's precisely why it's so hard to stay with. There's nothing to hold on to. Look at this in yourself. How often, when things become calm and ordinary, does anxiety appear? As if the lack of intensity meant lack of meaning. As if a life without inner fireworks were a waste. This is common and deeply human. But truth is rarely intense. Intensity belongs to the mind. Truth is stable, unmoved. It doesn't need confirmation or reaction. It's like a background that was present in all your experiences, both the exalted and the mundane. Ordinariness is the moment you stop adding anything to what is. No interpretation, no enhancement, no attempt to make the moment important. You simply are, and that simply can be unbearable for the ego. For many, this is one disappointing, and that disappointment is crucial because it marks the end of a particular illusion. That truth has to be spectacular to be real. That meaning must feel special. In reality, ordinariness is what remains when all projections fall away. When you no longer have to be on a path, when you no longer have to develop, when you no longer have to achieve anything to earn the right to exist. This isn't stagnation, it's rest from becoming. Notice how quickly the mind wants to argue. But growth, but purpose, but I should be doing something. Don't fight this. See the movement. It's fear of simplicity, fear of the absence of narrative, fear that maybe nothing needs to be added. In Zen tradition, there's a saying, mountains are mountains, rivers are rivers. It's often treated as metaphor, but it's literal. When you stop overlaying extra meaning, the world returns to its ordinariness. And so do you. The next time you think, this is too ordinary to be true, I must pause. Notice what you want to add, and see if without it, this moment isn't already enough. Ordinariness doesn't mean lack of depth. It means lack of separation. Depth isn't somewhere underneath. It's exactly in what's happening when you stop reaching elsewhere. You may discover something quietly radical. What you were searching for in peak experiences was always present in the simplest moments. Walking, washing dishes, a conversation without a goal. It was just too subtle for the mind to value. And maybe that's why ordinariness is so subversive. It strips spirituality of its specialness, and with it, your ideas about who you were supposed to become. Truth isn't extraordinary. It was your belief that it had to be that was. This is a moment most people don't expect, not because it's hidden, but because it doesn't fit any story about development. The moment when you realize there's nothing left to fix. And this doesn't mean everything is perfect. It means the very need to fix yourself loses its meaning. For the mind, this feels almost offensive, because if there's nothing to fix, then what now? What do you do with all the energy you've spent trying to improve yourself? What happens to the narrative of just a little more work and it will be okay? What happens to the identity of someone who is always on the way? This moment is often mistaken for resignation, for apathy, for lack of ambition, but it has nothing to do with that. It's more like exhaustion with a battle that never ended, because it was wrongly set up from the start. Look honestly, how many of your actions come from the belief, as I am now, I'm not enough yet? How much energy goes into correcting, smoothing, upgrading yourself? And how invisible this belief has become. The urge to fix yourself often disguises itself as responsibility, as growth, as maturity. But underneath, there's frequently a subtle refusal to allow existence as it is, as if you had to earn peace, as if being yourself were only provisional. The moment when there is nothing left to fix rarely arrives as a revelation. More often it arrives as weariness, as a quiet enough. Enough analyzing, enough patching, enough constantly checking whether you're okay. And then something loosens. Habits don't disappear, reactions don't vanish, difficult emotions don't stop arising. What disappears is the belief that these things are proof something is wrong with you. And that changes everything, though it looks unspectacular. The mind hates this emptiness, because emptiness offers no tasks, no plan, no identity. And yet it's exactly here that real rest becomes possible, not as someone who reached a goal, but as someone who stopped running. Many people at this point look for a new problem, a new level, a new subtle flaw to work on. This is natural. Old habits don't disappear instantly, but when you see the movement, you don't have to follow it. When the thought, "I should work on myself," appears, ask, "Is this actually true right now, or is it just an old reflex?" Don't fight it, just see it. When there's nothing left to fix, it doesn't mean nothing changes. Change continues naturally, without pressure, without effort, like ripening, which can't be forced or stopped. The difference is that change is no longer a condition for acceptance. You don't have to be different to be okay. You don't have to improve to deserve peace. It's not a reward, it's the starting point. Maybe that's why this moment is so quiet. There's no triumph, no sense of "I made it." There's ordinary life seen without the filter of constant lack. When you stop fixing yourself, you finally have a chance to live. For most of your life, something in you was on the way somewhere. Even if you couldn't name it, there was a sense of direction, movement. Not yet. Not quite. Becoming was quiet, but constant. Becoming better, calmer, more aware, more yourself. Paradoxically, somewhere in the future. And maybe only now are you beginning to see how deeply this was woven into your thinking. Becoming sounds innocent, motivating, developmental, and yet it carries a hidden assumption that being as you are right now is not enough, that this moment is only a transition, that real life will begin later, after another change, another insight, another understanding. Being is radical, because it doesn't offer the future as a refuge. Being makes no promises that things will get better. It doesn't say exhaustion will pass or chaos will resolve itself. Being offers no guarantees at all. It simply reveals what is already here without the footnote, "for now." And that's exactly why it can be so hard to accept. Look honestly, how often do you think of yourself as a version in progress? How often is your now just a waiting room, not a place you actually inhabit? This isn't a mistake. It's a learned survival strategy. But there comes a moment when it stops serving you. Being does not mean stagnation. This is important. It's one of the biggest misunderstandings. Being doesn't say nothing changes. It says change is not a requirement for presence. Movement still happens. Emotions still arise and pass. Decisions are made. Life flows. But there is no longer a story of "someday I will be." There is now. And now doesn't have to be good to be real. Pause for a moment. Not to feel something. Not to understand something. Simply notice that you are. Without labels. Without plans. Without goals. For the mind, this can be frustrating. The mind wants motion, progress, meaning stretched over time. Being is timeless. You can't plan it. You can't remember it. Either it's here or it's obscured, and it can't be maintained. Many people fear being because they associate it with passivity, with lack of ambition, with giving up. But being is the most dynamic state there is, because it's not filtered through an image of who you should be. You respond faster, you feel more fully, you act more appropriately, not because you're better, but because you're no longer busy managing yourself as a project. Being is intimate, close, sometimes raw, sometimes gentle. It doesn't give you the distance that becoming provides. You can't say, "This isn't me yet. This is it. This is you." So, very quiet pointer. The next time you catch the thought, "I still need to change," just pause. Don't correct the thought. Notice who you are without it, even for a moment. you may discover something that resists words. Being is not something you practice. It's something that reveals itself when you stop escaping into the future. When you no longer need a story about where you're going in order to have permission to be here. This is not a finale, not an achievement, not even a state. It's the very ordinary experience of no longer separating yourself, from life, from what's happening. And if one sentence were to remain not as a summary but as a direction without guarantees, it might be this: you don't have to become, it's enough to stop running from being. Thank you for spending this time here. If this reflection gave you something to think about, helped you see something differently, or simply offered a moment of stillness in a busy day, we invite you to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This space is dedicated to thoughtful conversations about spirituality, self-awareness, and living with greater honesty and presence, without cliches, false promises, or easy answers. By subscribing, you'll be part of a growing community interested not in escaping life but in meeting it more fully. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to sharing the next journey with you.